maybe we call these legends, because in the Winnebago language from which these stories come, they have legends, which are waikans, and wodaks, which are stories based on some historical event. In this case, these are waikans. Since you've had some snowfall this fall and all the snakes have returned into the earth and hibernating, well, then we can proceed traditionally, culturally, in telling these legends. In the beginning of time, like every other story talk about creation. The Winnebago deity called Mauna, the earth maker, after his creation of the earth and whatever is in it or on it, he was sort of examining this here, and he found that among his creation there were evil, well, they may have not been evil, they may have been some monsters and giants that were around doing their thing, but they had disturbed the society of those who were walking on two legs, the pride and joy of Mauna's creation. And yet, they being the poorest of all his creation, he was quite protective of them, and so he thought he'd have to get rid of, have caused the beasts that molested the people, the things that we might call evil spirits that were bothering them and spoiling the society, the setup. He would have to, they'd have to go, so he had 5 sons, so the legend says. The first one was Kunu and Hena and so forth. The first one was called Wakchankaga, which interpreted means sort of a clownish person. And he had one there, they called him the turtle, Kechungaga, and then there's another one they called Watehuga, which was meant similar to a bladder. And a third one was he who wore men's faces or heads for earrings. And the fifth one was the hair, Washingega. So of all these characters, because maybe I lean towards the humorous side of life and like the funny man and like the clowns in the circuses. I somewhat paid more attention to the stories about this character, Wakchankaga. And Paul Radin in his writings and so forth, he has interpreted this Wakchankaga name to be called the trickster. Both in all walks of life and all civilizations, we've had other characters that are similar to this. I don't believe that he was really a mean person. He was a character that just on the spur of the moment he saw a chance to be funny, although maybe he wasn't funny at all. He was setting himself up a trap to entrap himself at many times. So he wasn't a vicious person because he was a son of Mauna. He had supernatural powers. He was endowed with these powers, and he could have used them at all times, but his orders were to come to Earth and get rid of what was bugging his little red people. But he was one person that had a mind of his own, and you might say he could be disobedient. Now, there's a lot of things about this character that brings out what is in man, his man's way of doing things. At times he's rebellious against orders, and disobedience against direction. And so in the character, so I'll try to tell it, and I'll try to tell the thing as it is, as it was told to me. But in some of the stories might, if you're a Puritan, you please close your ears right now, because you'll say it would not be good for the small ones to hear this. But I don't know if it had ruined any small ones. I certainly have been spoiled many times, because this is one character I liked, and liked to listen to the stories of his antics. So the first thing we've got to think about, his coming. He had orders from his father, the earth maker, to get down here and get rid of the beasts, the monsters, the giants, or whatever caused trouble amongst his little people. So we didn't say where he came from, but that's wherever Mauna is. But anyhow, we have the arrival of this number one son. And he walked among the people, and he looked at them. Of course, these people were Winnebagos, Ho-Chungara, and nobody else. So he looked at them, watched what they were doing, and he thought they were cute, or words, something like that, meaning that they were, well, he liked them. And his attention came to rest on what they were doing. Now, he began to show his true colors. He was forgetful also. He had instructions what to do when he came. And so his attention turned to the people. And he said, thought to himself, I'll tease this one and tease that one. And so they'll have a little laughter. And, oh, he said, they're cute. He said, I'd like to see them laugh a little more, you know. So he gets around and he sets little traps here and there, little tricks to pull on the people, and thought, well, they're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to have a great time. So this is where he began to forget his orders. It's like you sent some kids down to the store and said, don't go this way, and don't stop to do this over there. Don't tease the neighbor's dog behind that fence there, because he might jump over it and come get you. But going to the store, we have to stop and tease that dog, and not just like a child. So he was. And the more he involved himself with the people, the more he forgot, the further away he got from his instructions. So it is about this character that, well, the story goes that he began by wandering over the earth, from place to place and seeking these supposedly the evil spirits, but he was always looking to play tricks on the animals, the creatures of the earth. So then he'd also get himself into trouble many times. So it was doing these wanderings that he thought he'd return back to the Winnebago village. Supposedly we'll call this the home base. And he had been around quite a while, and people began to call him Wakchankaga, the clown. Or, well, the guy is a little bit off. So he had earned his name already from the people. Wakchankaga means he's a clown, the funny guy. So it went on, and so he'd wander around the country. He'd get through one place, or somebody might take offense to what he did, and they'd chase him out of town. But anyhow, he was on the move, and he thought he'd go back home, so he'd been in the Northland somewhere, and he headed back towards Winnebago land. And as he came south, why, he recognized some of the landmarks. Now, he said, I'm getting pretty close to home, and this was in the morning. It didn't say whether he arose early in the morning or what, but he had been on the move. So now this is morning, and he thought to himself about noon, when they have the lunch all made, I'll be there so I can come in on it. I'll get a free one. So he hurried along, and there's one more hill, and he began to climb. So moving rather fastly, why, climbing up the north side of this big high hill, and it's a little bit steeper on the north, because in nature, somehow or another, the storms, rains, snows melt away on the south slopes, and so most of the south slopes of these hills have a gentler incline. But the north side, most generally always is pretty steep, so he's climbing the north side, and climbing up, it takes a lot of energy. And then on the way up, he thought, well, he heard drums. He thought to himself, the scouts done a good job that time. He said they were out watching, and they saw me coming and notified the people. Now they're glad I'm coming home, and they are having a dance to celebrate my homecoming. And as he neared the top, sure enough, these drums kept getting louder and louder, and they went somewhat thump, 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 thump. Well, there's certain rhythm to certain dances, and this is it. Sure enough, he said, they are having a dance. About this time, he got to the top of the hill, and he looked over the other side, and it was high noon. And he looked down the hillside over there, and sure enough, there was many people down there in their colored feathers, all out there dancing. So he waited a little bit and thought, well, and I'll shout to them and let them know that I appreciate what they're doing for me. So he watched them for a while, and I don't know if you ever did a fast hill climb. So you're in such an excitement to get up to the top of the hill, maybe you strained yourself a little bit, so your eyes are a little bit blurry when you get up there. So maybe this is what happened to him. But he seen all these people dancing. And so he waited a while and caught his breath, but it still, the drums kept going, so he said, "Oh, hey!" But they didn't pay any attention to him. They just kept on going. Huh. I'll try again. So he hollers out there like you're hollering at somebody in the distance. And they paid no attention to him. On several occasions, usually they said 4 times, they'd do something and repeat it. So this last time he said, "Ha ha, I know." He said, "Now they've changed it to a dancing contest." So he said, "If they want to see a good dancer, maybe they're teasing me. Well, I'll just dance with them. I'll have a contest with them. And I'll out-dance every one of them." So saying, he took his camping outfit, which was a large raccoon skin that he used for his bedroll, and he always carried a little box in there, whether it had medicine or whatever it was. And he put those down, and he got out and he started to dance. He'd hoop it up a little bit and dancing around. And it happened that on top of this hill the breeze was blowing. So he thought to himself, how fortunate for me. Those in the valley, they're down there and not getting this good breeze. He said, "I get out dancing." So there he was. He'd dancing and dancing, dancing. So they danced all afternoon. Towards evening, the breeze stopped blowing, and he just kept on dancing, thinking that, well, he's showing them how good a dancer he was. Well, when he stopped, he looked down the hill there, and everybody was standing still. There's no breeze on top of the hill. Ha! He says, now, he said, they've seen a dancer. So they felt ashamed about what they were doing. Now they saw a good dancer, so they quit. Now I'll go down and receive their congratulations. So he picked up his little box and his coonskin bedroll, and he goes down to where these people were. It was shocking to him, I guess, to find that the dancers that he thought he saw dancing was, there's sumac trees. They're bright red and yellow leaves, which was waving in a breeze. Where was the drums? So what was happening was that he's climbing this hill, exerting all his energy to climb that hill, and that sets up a rapid heartbeat, and then sometimes you can exert yourself to the point that you can hear their heartbeat in your head, in your ears. It just sounds loud. But I guess nowadays you're coming near, your heart is getting bad or something. You've worked a little bit too hard. So as he climbed this hill and listened, he heard drums. Well, that was his heartbeat that he heard, which sounds like it was right up in his, coming from the outside into his ears, but it's working the other way. It was within himself. The thump, 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 thump. So he continued this thump, thump by joining in with the sumacs and dancing with them all afternoon. And so he thought a while. He says to himself, no wonder the people call me the foolish one. This Wakchankaga also means he's foolish. not to be trusted. You can doubt his truthfulness. He'll always be tricking you. So this is where Radin gave him the name the trickster, but the Winnebagos still call him Wakchankaga. And anyone who might be tempted to do those things that Wakchankaga does will be a Wakchanka. Now those stories will follow one experience to another, because suppose it's just like the thread of life. If you cut it off someplace, it's done. So the stories are interconnected. Sometimes you have to, if you forget one, why you quickly join another story to it. He's doing something else. It's a continuous thing. It's one story made up of many. We'll continue on with Mr. Wakchankaga, or I say Wakchankaga, our friend here, and of course I'd like to tell you about the others, but this is my favorite, so we'll just stay with him. So that he got back to Winnebago country, and it was right after he found out that the Shumacs could dance and beat a drum, and so he decided that it was foolish of him to jump to conclusions real quick and said, they're dancing. So in kind of a pensive mood, he wandered on. And it's still daylight, so he walks to the edge of the little lake there and began to look that lake over. And he looked across, and there he saw a guy pointing, So he hollered at him, and the guy wouldn't quit pointing. So I just stood out there and pointing at something. So he turned around and he looked all over to see what the guy was pointing at, and there was nothing spectacular out there to hold his attention, so he comes back at the guy and hollers at him again. Hey! The guy didn't pay attention to him. He just stood there and still pointing. Of course, I imagine he looked across there and got his focus on that guy by putting his hand up there, shielding his eyes from that light that's shining there. And when he hollered at him, he didn't move at all. So the guy's a wise guy, he said, and he thinks he's the only guy around, I guess, so I'm nothing. Oh, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to have a contest with me, so I'll do that too. So there he said, I can point. He said, I'll point you anytime. So there he stood. Boy, his arm got tired after a while, but he said, with a wry face, he just kept holding that arm up there. Finally, the sun went down, and it got dark, so I don't think he's going to stand over there and point all night, so I'll take mine down. He said, I can't see him. Surely he can't see me. Well, he said, it's too dark to travel. I'll just camp right here. So next morning he gets up and he looked across there in the early morning. He saw this guy pointing again. He said, I'm going to go over there and see who he is. I'll stand right alongside of him and point too, if he wants to still have a contest. So he walked around the lake. And he got over there. It's remains of an old tree in that area that had a little forest fire one time on that side of the lake, and that trunk of the tree was up there with one branch that looked like a man standing over there pointing from where he saw him. So, again, he says, I know now why they call me the foolish one. There you go again, jumping to conclusions. So from here on, he wanders along the lake, which has a stream coming into it, and also, or several streams, you might say, and a river flowing out of it. As he wandered along, he said, well, that kind of pointing deal back there was very tiresome. I think I'll just rest here a while. So as he rested on the bank of this stream, why, he heard some noise. So this noise was somewhat kind. So he sat around and listened to what that was. And finally he saw a group of gnats that would come up out of the grass, and they'd fly up there and make this noise. And the group sort of come back down and disappear in the tall grass again. And we soon as start up again. Oh, they was up there just flying around having a wonderful time. Then they'd go back down. Hey, what's going on here? So he goes over and looks, and there was a skull of an elk that was there in the weeds, and you see the group fly up and then come back down, and they would go into the neck part of the skull and come out of the nostril. Whatever happens to them on the inside, I don't know, but the gnats would crawl in the neck part and come out the nostril, and then they say, then they take off again. They're all pretty happy when I come out of there. So he said to one of them, hey, little brother, he said, you're having a lot of fun, aren't you? So they answered him back, yes, we are. My voice is a little bit out, so I can't squeak like one of those gnats. In fact, he had quite a pair of ears to hear their talk, you know, they're such small things. Or he had a wonderful imagination, one of the two, right? So finally he decided that he'd like to have fun with them. He said, could I join you? And they answered back that he could if he wanted to. Well, sure, I want to. And when he said that instant, he got pretty small. So he joined them, and he flapped his arms around and he began to imitate what they were doing, and he made out pretty good. So he'd crawl inside the neck and come out of the nostril and zoom up with him and make that funny noise and back down. And finally, they got tired of that sport, so they began to quit. And just as he was going into the neck again, he thought about something else that was more liking to the human, I suppose, and he changed back to himself, and here that skull was stuck on his head. And now he's in a predicament. He tried to pull it off, but it was too tight. And I imagine the air wasn't so very good inside that skull. And so next thing he gets a little bit excited, and he steps off the bank of the river and falls in the water, and then he hangs on the bank. And well, the water's moving this way, he said, I'll go down with it. Now, as he did that early in the morning, well, here he comes to the place where the women of the village come to get water at the river. And it just so happened that an Indian maiden was going down to get some water when this horned thing spoke to her out there. And oh, he said, you are going to be blessed. You are a lucky soul, if that's what he meant. But I'm not talking Winnebago, so I'm just trying to translate it. And she answered, what have I done to be blessed? Well, just to be here. And you will get further blessings if you will listen and do what I tell you to. Oh, she was all for that, you know, so she asked what might she do. And he instructed her to go to the village and get 6 strong men and bring an axe and a good axeman and tell the people that the spirit of the water spirit is going to bless you some more. So the young lady, she ran back to the village and told a story about seeing the water spirit sitting there waiting to bless her some more if she'd carry out his instructions. So everyone was excited, and so we'll have to go down and see this. So here come the whole village down there to see this water spirit that speaks to people. And so he came, and there it sat out there. Wakachunkaga made sure just the skull was sticking out of the water. And so the people gathered around, and he says, ho! And everybody hoed, I guess. So they listened. I said, the strong men come forward. 3 on each side pull on the horns. 1 with the axe come forward. Not too deep. Split this skull in 2 and you will have a wonderful surprise. So everybody was awe-stricken by this water spirit talking to them. So the strong men went out there and grabbed the horns and they began to pull on them, the axeman. Very careful, start splitting that skull down the middle, wondering what the wonderful surprise was going to be. So everyone was filled with great expectations of being blessed by the Spirit. So finally the axeman tapped it just right, and the strong men were pulling on the horns, and whoop, it fell apart, and there Wakachunkaga stood up, and he says, ha, 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 ha. Well, you can tell what happened to him. They probably almost drowned him at that time, you know. But then he gets away from these people, and he journeys on to do something else. It's like he stayed around this lake for quite a bit before moving on elsewhere. And so this is where he comes in contact with the feathered ones. You see, in the fall of the year, or maybe not, the spring of the year, whenever it was, but the lake had a lot of ducks and geese on it. And another thing about my friend here, this Wakachunkaga, he had a big appetite. And once he gets started to eat, he can sit and eat and eat and eat. So he had devised a plan to have a nice dinner. So he built a framework of poles, and he gathered some of the rushes along the water's edge and made a covering out of that and covered this framework. And so the birds came over and said, "Big brother, what are you doing?" "Oh," he said, "I have a whole bag of songs back there." He said, "I was going to get this thing covered and sit in here and sing." "Well, can we come and listen to you?" "Sure," he said. "And in fact, I want you to dance when I sing." "Oh, that'll be fine." So he enticed the birds to file into this lodge, and he sat in a doorway after he got him inside. And first he said, "We have to dance with your eyes closed." So while you're following one another and you go around several times, you'll know how to go so you won't run into something. And in fact, there's nothing in there to run into except the side of the lodge. We'll make out, but he said, "I don't want anybody to open their eyes." So he began his singing, and he thought maybe afterthought he said they might open their eyes, and cheat a little bit. So he said, "No, the one that opens their eyes while I'm singing is going to thereafter have red eyes." Now, nobody wants red eyes, do they? Or do they? So just to caution you, he said, anybody tries to peek or anything until the song is ended, he's going to have red eyes. Well, they danced around in there, and he's sitting there singing. And I'm not in that musical department right now, so I won't sing that song. So he give them their song, and so now he said, "Now this is a livelier dance, and you should squawk once in a while, and you geese should honk once in a while." I said, "Why? The other brothers, when they dance, they give out war whoops once in a while and so forth. So you must do that." So when I was doing this dance, that he was observing the fat ones as they waddled by. Why, he'd reached out and twist their necks, and he's going to have himself a nice big dinner. So about that time they were making that funny kind of a squawk. So I think that teal was back there. So he peeked a little bit, and just then, he seen Wakchankaga grab a big fat goose or something and twist its neck. And he let out the alarm and said, he's tricking us, he's killing us. And so the rest of them opened their eyes. About that time, he quit singing, see. While this was going on, they wasn't catching up to him, because he'd say, "That's it, little brother, just give out another whoop," and he'd twist its neck off. And about time it said, "Quack," or something. And he was getting by until that teal peaked. And so it is said today that the teal has a red eye. And if that's so, it's been ever since that dance that the teal was in the lodge. So now here he's going to satisfy his appetite, so he built a big fire. And when he got through all the coals and so forth, he raked it aside. This was on that shore of that little lake. And he buried these birds in there. Of course, I suppose he cleaned them up, and he buried the carcasses in this hot sand, covered them up, and threw the coals back on there, and let their feet sticking out. So he waited in proper time that they were nicely done, and he digs one out and sits down to begin his meal. But just about that time, he started taking a bite. There was a couple of trees over here, and the branches would move, and they just rub against one another, and it just squeak. Now, Wakatankaga didn't want to be disturbed when he was eating, or he wouldn't enjoy his meal, so he scolds the tree. So you stop that. Don't disturb me while I'm trying to have my meal. Stop. So by the time he's going to take another bite, or try to take a bite, the tree would squeak again. The branches are rubbing. Oh, as usual, he waited till it did it 4 times, and then he put his meat down. He said, I'm coming up to take care of you. So he got up there and he grabbed those big branches and tried to pull them apart or do something to them in his human strength. And about that time, the wind blew again and got his hands caught in the branches, and there he was. He couldn't get his hands out. And he's mumbling to himself that he got himself trapped. And he's scolding the trees. And he said, turn me loose. Well, once again, the trees begin to answer him. Now, this went on for about 4 times. He was telling that tree to turn him loose, and the tree said, well, brother, we can't do anything of our own. We have to stand in one place all our lives, give you people shade, places for the birds to nest. This is our duty. We don't do anything. We don't move until somebody else moves us. Just then a group of wolves were coming by, and if he'd have kept still, it'd been fine. But he said, hey, brothers. The lead wolf looks up there, and oh, he said, that's the trickster up there. He said, I wonder what he's up to. Hey, what are you doing over there? He said, can we help you? No, get out of here. He said, don't come this way. Especially don't go over this way. So they reasoned with themselves. He don't want us over there. He must have something over there. And he's done something. He's trying to pull a trick on somebody, and he's got himself into trouble. We don't want any part of him. No. But he says, don't go over there. Let's go over there. So they went over there and found his big cookout there. So they sat down and ate his birds up, ate his dinner, and went on their wolfish way. About that time, Wakatankaga, he's quite upset about things, and with his own strength, his decision, I'm going to get out of this. So he pulled his hands free. He said, I should have done this a long time ago. Waiting for that tree to do this. Sort of slapped the limbs and said, why didn't you obey me? He said, we move only when the wind blows or moves us. He said, you have all the powers that anyone wants if you would use it when you want something done. But big brother, you forget so much. He said, you've got a lot of power. You can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. And so Wakchankaga again decided that it was true what they were calling him, Wakchankaga, that he was foolish. He was just nothing but a clown. So that brings us up to the next, and there's following sequences, there's other stories that joins right on. In fact, there is no end to these stories. If you observe closely your fellow men, you will see Wakchankaga also portrayed by different one of us, each one portraying something about the trickster. This time I want to tell you about what's about to happen here now. We're going on with the trickster. Wakchankaga, he came down with his instructions, as I said in the beginning of this session. But from here on, this gentleman or this character developed into a real dunce, you might say. Come right out, speaking right out. He was first clownish and this and that, but that, due to his habit of playing tricks on other people and so forth, he is getting further and further away from his mission to Earth, and this has taken hold on him, so now he even forgets who he is at times and forgets that he has been endowed with supernatural powers. He seems to get more helpless, and he even gets to a place now where the following story will wonder why he's doing this. He looks on the parts of his body as separate from himself. I don't know, maybe some know the word mashigana, where mind, soul, and body separate and do not communicate. One thinks those guys, the other one thinks them guys. So in the following story will be brought out what's happened to his mind. As we go along in the story here, continuing on, it's going to bring out that where he begins to think these parts, one hand is an individual, the other hand is another individual, and so is the rest of part of his body. Even his sex organs are, he calls them brothers. So this is what happens to a person who might be ordered or devise a plan and leaves the plan or aim and deviates away from what is proper action to get him to his goal in life. I'm trying to make the explanation now so that we won't have to answer any more questions on them. I'm trying to show that this is the overall grouping these stories together shows what happens to an individual who doesn't stick to the plan, the purpose of his life. He begins to go to pieces later on if he doesn't stay strictly on what he's supposed to be doing. So in the last story, I think we talked about the wolves got away with Wakchankaga's meal. Now he's still hungry. And as he travel along this lake body of water where he's been carrying on his trickery and so forth, he spotted an old buffalo, a lone buffalo, and so in his mind of, or a bag of tricks, you might say, now he's beginning to pull these tricks out. How might I ensnare that buffalo so that I can have a good meal? He's always thinking about eating. And so he goes around this buffalo and he begins to drive that buffalo towards a very muddy area in this, along the lake. We have little swampy places. And he finally got the buffalo to move out into this area, and he got stuck in there. He couldn't get out, so then Wakchankaga goes over there and probably cuts his jugular vein. I don't know how to butcher a buffalo, but that's what the story goes on to say, that he killed this buffalo, and instead of pulling him out of the mud, he's going to butcher him right there and get his meat. So he gets his skinning knife out and begins to skin the buffalo. And he talks to his right hand. He says, well, brother, he said, you know what to do. You've got the instrument. But the right hand don't answer him. He just goes ahead and starts cutting and skinning the buffalo, or maybe cutting out a choice part of the, what they call a round or whatever. And so the left hand was helping the right hand. But somehow the left hand overreached and got a hold of the right hand, and so Wakchankaga sitting there noticed this, and he said, hey, you better leave your brother alone. So, and help him. So the left hand grabbed hold of maybe the hide and pulled on it, while the right hand did a little more cutting, and finally going to change hold again. He got a hold of the left, or the left got a hold of the right again. So Wakchankaga says, no, I told you not to bother him. You help. You brothers better get along. So again, the thing went on that the left hand was pulling on the hide while the right hand was cutting away. And in order to change hold again, why, he overreached and got a hold of the right hand again. He said, I told you to quit that. Now you brothers better watch out here. So now he's done this 4 times. So on the 4th time, Wakchankaga says, now, I've forbidden you to do this. Now, since you've been doing it and continue to do it, I think it's about time you two have a fight. So go ahead and fight. Remember, the right hand had the knife, so here they were fighting, and the right hand was slashing the left hand and left arm and so forth. The left side was getting the worst of it. Yeah, that's it. Go ahead. Make him bleed. So finally he got to a point where he started to pity the left hand. He says, ho, ho. He said, little brother, he said, you got the worst end of it. He said, come on, little brother, here, help me fix him up. So here's the right hand, put the knife down, and he bandaged up the left arm. So this is what beginning where he began to look at his parts and call them little brothers. They were not part of him. As I explained, this is what's happening. And so he goes on through life calling them brothers now from here on, until maybe sometime sometime later on that he's going to realize that this is all a part of himself. He's a unit. It was like I explained, that's the moral of this, that story of the fighting hands, was that if you don't hold yourself all together, well, you're going to have be facing trouble pretty soon with your own self. Maybe in violation of the rules of life and so forth. Why we call it disease today. One part of the body gets sick because you didn't take care of it. You forget for a little while that if you lay on a cold ground without protecting your back or something like that, you're bound to have backache. You catch a cold in the back or catch a cold in the lungs if you don't protect yourself against the weather. This is in that line while these stories are told. There is some lessons from these stories. Of course, there's a lot of foolishness going on, but the main thing is that there are some lessons to be learned from these stories, just like the fighting hand. He finally realizes that these brothers were connected to him. So I somewhat don't tell stories like the Indians tell them, because some people feel there's some nastiness about them. But the Indians went ahead and told stories like it is. We got stories about the sex parts and so forth like that. So a little tyke that grows up listening to these stories knows all about what today we say we teach them about the birds and the bees. They already know it when the time comes. They know what to do. And it's from these kind of stories, legends and so forth, that these lessons are taught.